tonight. I was able to get on the air a bit. So can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you. Go ahead, Bob.
Perfect. And you want me to dive right in, Tim?
Yes, dive right in.
Excellent. Well, it's so nice to see everybody, and wow, what a busy club with so many awesome things going on. I'll swap between some slides. Can you see my slide okay?
Yes, it looks great, Bob.
Great. Awesome. It's nice when technology works. So it's great to be here with the club this evening, and you're an example of a club doing great things. And I particularly like something I heard this evening, and that was that the club is paying attention to all those people that come through its exams. Super, super important these days. I am the Director of Marketing and Innovation at ARL headquarters. And it's a privilege really to work at ARL headquarters. I have worked here since 1991, so as a small boy starting on the staff here. And I was licensed in 1982, and my journey is probably not a lot different than a lot of loyal radio amateurs who got a start in amateur radio when they were a kid. A middle school vice principal made an announcement one day and said in sixth grade, does anybody who wants to get their amateur radio license, please stop by the vice principal's office after school. And I did that with a dozen other kids, and was introduced to a book at the time called Tune in the World with ham radio, with amateur radio, got my novice license, and made my dad cover our house with antennas as a middle school student. So I've been a ham for my entire life. I love amateur radio, and I'm still learning new things all the time in amateur radio. So one of the things I'll start my presentation off this evening is in a different place than the update that I promised Tim. And it's just to demonstrate to you something that we're paying attention to all the time at ARL. And that's how do we grow amateur radio? How do we grow amateur radio? And in my 32 years at ARL headquarters, I can tell you that I've heard every idea. We've circled back around on some of the same ideas multiple times and tried different things. And there's no silver bullet. So I haven't seen in my 32 years a silver bullet, and I venture to say some of you haven't found it yet either. But the silver bullet, well, maybe there is one silver bullet. In Tennessee, they bought a billboard, and a couple million drivers by see this billboard every year in Tennessee. It's pretty exciting when an ARL member calls you up and says, I own a billboard where 3 million people see it every year. Can we put something on it from ARL? And I said, sure. And I had my choice. I could put a big ARL thing up there, but I decided to put up something that talked about radio communications. And believe it or not, it actually generates a whole lot of interest and a whole lot of traffic to our What is Ham Radio website. But back to that story of growing amateur radio, you know, we have 3 million radio amateurs worldwide. That's the number that's been batted around for a number of years, including by IARU. And there's about 765,000 licensees in the United States. And I looked that number up this evening. So that's a number as of yesterday. And there are 30,000 new hams every year. So we ought to be really growing significantly in amateur radio, one would think. But there's a rush to licensing in amateur radio. There's a rush to licensing. It's not difficult to get your amateur radio license, right? We tell our families and friends, just do it. It's easy. I'll get you a book. Use this online resource. Keep studying. Memorize the questions. Take this boot camp. Our club is offering a crash course this weekend, or the Ham Fest is offering a crash course. All of us know that there's a rush to amateur radio licensing. That's not the hard part. But growing amateur radio, I believe, begins with the gift of these 30,000 new licensees each year. And that number's been coming in almost without fail for a number of years recently. 30,000 new licensees. The hard work really is getting them involved, getting them on the air, and we say here at ARL headquarters here, getting them radioactive. What can we do to give them experiences that get them radioactive? By all accounts, being a member of ARL separates a lot of the inactive hams from the active hams. We know that. We do surveys and national studies all the time. People who are ARL members are far and away more active in amateur radio than the population of non-members. But we're not satisfied with that. There's still a lot of work that we together have to do with our radio clubs. And there's a lot of good things going on in amateur radio, but one of the things that works against us is that in many of our radio clubs, recruitment, licensing, examining, and mentoring are all siloed. And again, one of the things I heard tonight from Tim and others who were talking was how you're paying attention to what I call an ecosystem where recruitment, licensing, examining, and mentoring are in one breath, right? We do all of those things together. We bring in people in amateur radio, and our recruiters in our radio club are doing a seamless pass off to the licensing class, and they're doing a pass off to the examining group. And the examining group is hand-holding the new licensees to the people in the radio club who support strong mentoring or strong hand-holding to get them active in amateur radio. When we do all those things together, those are the vibrant radio clubs in the United States right now. The radio clubs who treat these activities as sort of an ecosystem. So that's sort of my my background mantra on what we ought to be doing together. But I want to cover some of the cool and exciting and interesting things ARL is doing right now this year for to grow amateur radio and to provide members with more benefits and to provide opportunities for people to become more radioactive. This is our Year of the Volunteers. We decided on a theme this year, and this is ARL's Year of the Volunteers. It's got a happy story, right? We want to recognize people who step up to be members, people who step up to be field organization volunteers, section managers, board members. None of those people get paid. You couldn't pay me to be on the ARL board of directors. It's a lot of work. These people meet regularly on Zoom. They're part of committees that have to put together studies and strategic planning work. They have to wrestle with where they think the future of our service and hobby are going. They work really hard, but they're volunteers. They're sort of peer among peers in amateur radio, and they're elected by members. But there's also volunteer examiners and members of the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, section emergency coordinators, DXCC card checkers. There are so many different ways that we have organized the fun and the activities that we do in amateur radio, and much of it relies and is on the backs of hardworking volunteers. In your radio clubs, some of the hardest working volunteers in your radio club are often your club president and your club newsletter editor. I say club newsletter editor because, boy, I'll tell you, the radio clubs that I've been part of throughout my time in amateur radio, when I go to the mailbox and I get my club newsletter or my inbox for my club newsletter, it's like opening up the church bulletin from the church update from my local church. I treat amateur radio and my church almost the same way. What's going on? Who's doing what? What am I looking forward to next month in the radio club? So lots of great things happening with volunteers and lots of opportunity for ARL to spotlight opportunities for people to get more involved. And I'd also offer you a charge. There's a leadership deficit in amateur radio right now, and that's one of the things that's struggling against growing amateur radio. Clubs with a tired leadership, hamfests with a tired leadership, no one's stepping up to take the lead. We're not filling roles in radio clubs. We're not filling roles in the ARL section manager program. We're not filling roles in our field organization appointees. We don't have anyone running against somebody for director. We need all of that to happen for a vibrant amateur radio. So one of the charges I want to offer you tonight is, and we're all saying this at ARL from the bottom up, is reach one rung higher. Reach one rung higher. If you're a member right now of ARL, consider becoming a Diamond Club member and provide the organization with additional resources. Volunteer some of your money to help the organization go further with its work. If you're a member of a radio club, consider looking at some of the officer positions in your radio club. If you're a radio club officer, consider looking at joining the aerial field organization, maybe run for section manager. If you're a section manager, maybe run for director in ARL of your division. There's lots of opportunities to step up. They can be baby steps and they can be big steps as well. But we really need to tackle this, this issue of this leadership deficit if we're going to do great things in amateur radio. One of the places I see a leadership deficit is at the IARU and the work that we do in advocacy in meetings like the ITU meetings, places where we're dealing with regulatory changes or perspective changes to amateur radio and radio communications in general in the future. ARL needs to protect amateur radio in the future. And much of the work that's done at these government meetings at the national or international level are done by volunteers for us. They're often people with maybe a law background or a spectrum management background. The pool of these people are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and we need those people in order to protect our spectrum in the future. So be on the lookout. Tap the people who you believe ought to take that next step up the rung of the ladder. One of the ways we're having some fun with Year of the Volunteers is an all-year operating event this year called Volunteers on the Air. And we've made it really easy to play the game. If you've remembered National Parks on the Air that ARL introduced some years ago. In fact, National Parks on the Air became so popular that an outcropping of that one-year-long event was POTA, Parks on the Air, right? Everybody had so much fun working parks that it's become part of our part of the fabric of amateur radio now through Parks on the Air. This is an all-year event where you work other volunteers in the ARL community, starting with members all the way on up through the president of ARL. You work them on the air, you upload your logs to the logbook of the world, or they upload their log to the logbook of the world. It doesn't require a QSL handshake. So only one half of that contact needs to upload the contact, and you're in the game. You get extra points for some of the different volunteers that you get to operate on the air all year. So for instance, the ARL president is worth 300 points. A life member is worth 2 points. A Diamond Club member is worth 25 points. Staff have points. Volunteer examiners have points. DXCC card checkers have points. Clubs based on their club call sign are points. And so I'm having fun right now on FT8. People are chasing me. I'm seeing myself spotted from time to time for my FT8 contacts because I'm participating in Volunteers on the Air. So it's fun to be a small station like I am in my apartment operating this event where people are chasing me for my 50 points as a staff member. We're having a lot of fun with it. And there's a leaderboard. All you have to do is visit, let's see, I think it's volunteer. Let me see what the web address is. I think it's vota.arrl.org, vota.arrl.org, and that will take you right to the leaderboard for the event, volunteersontheair.arl.org. So a leaderboard there, you can see who's doing really well in the contest. By a show of hands, I can see some of you in the room. Anyone participating in VOTA already? I don't see too many hands. So I encourage you to try to get on the air this year and make some contacts with it. It's a lot of fun. So for a lot of members of ARL, getting QST magazine in their mailbox is that touch point every year, every month that they think of ARL. But a couple of years ago, ARL introduced an app, a magazines app, and also a browser version of this. and you can access QST online now. If you haven't done this already, you need to visit the ARL website, set up your account online so that you can access some of the members only benefits that are available to you because you're logged into the website. An easy way to do this is just to visit the ARL website, go to the top of the screen, click login. But if you haven't established a login already, just follow the instructions on the screen to set that up. And if you need help with that, drop me a note, give us a call. We're happy to help you. But you're missing a ton of benefits if you're not logging into that website. So one of the things you can access is ARL magazines through an app or through a browser. And in 2020, we launched a brand new magazine, the first time we launched a new magazine in decades. And that magazine is called On the Air. On the Air just came out in January 2020. It's not been around very long. It is a magazine ARL introduced to help new and intermediate licensees get more active in a variety of different activities. And so we use On the Air to introduce things like FT8, what's solar cycle, how do you build a dipole, how do you get involved in the field organization, what's the pathway to become involved in emergency communications, how do you build something. We cover a lot of different things in On the Air at a very entry level. One of the things we were super surprised at in 2020 was that by the year end, we wanted 10,000 people to be in this magazine, new and intermediate people who are just getting started in amateur radio. But we saw a ton of extra class and general class existing members, some loyal members for a long time, opt out of QST and into On the Air. And we investigated why, and they told us. They said, it's because I've been a ham for a long time, but I've never set up a station in my house before, never really gotten involved. I've always been a member of my radio club, but I participate in their field day. I don't have my own station. I'm still confused by a lot of things. My club doesn't mentor very well. And On the Air is the place where they're getting some of that additional handholding and an introduction to a lot of different things. So the growth for On the Air magazine comes from new licensees, people who've just been licensed under 5 years, but also some people who have opted even at an extra class or general class to just learn a little bit more about amateur radio and then eventually migrate more over to QST magazine. The other cool thing that we did shortly after introducing On the Air is we took our existing magazines, QEX and NCJ, and unleashed them to ARL members digitally. So ARL members now have access to 4 digital magazines: QST, On the Air, QEX, our magazine for experimenters, and NCJ, the National Contest Journal. And by the way, you can see the big 50 on the National Contest Journal. It celebrates its 50th anniversary this year, and we're pretty proud of ARL's publishing history, but also a history that began even before ARL was involved in NCJ, of the contest community serving each other with a periodical that was going to help get people more active and involved in amateur radio contesting. Today, there's lots of contributors. I turned to NCJ to find out what some of the big gun stations are doing to make amateur radio more fun for all of us. And there's plenty of good human interest stories in there, but there's also plenty of great stories to urge you to become an even more active On the Air contester or award hunter. Another way that we've been working with the amateur radio manufacturing community is to find ways to provide kit building experiences that will be successful experiences that will give licensees a better chance at building more antennas, building a QRP radio, trying FT8, establishing their own personal station at home, going portable, lots of different hands-on activities. So about 2 years ago, we introduced an NFED half-wave antenna kit with a partner called HF Kits in the Netherlands. Now, we combed the world for really good NFED antennas, and we really liked this particular one because of its price point, but also because it's an antenna design that you can throw up at home and it'll stay up for multiple seasons, multiple years. It's not just a up and down antenna. You could put this antenna up and you'll enjoy it for a long time. It's that good of a quality build. But it's also a super portable antenna. And if you know anything about an end fed, all you have to do is throw one end of this up in a tree, up on a mount or something, and the rest of it comes right down to your station, and you can plug right into the transformer, and you're on the air. The kit is really easy. I think it sells right now by ARL for around $79.95. In the 2 years, it's not even 2 years yet, but in the 2 years that we've been offering this kit, we've moved over 5,000 of them. And every time I'm on the air, somebody tells me from W1AW, someone will tell me, "Hey, Bob, guess what? I'm using the NFED that I got from ARL." They're having a successful kit building experience, and they have a super antenna that gets them on the air right away. I actually took it out to field day in 2021. That's me in a gazebo in Worcester, Massachusetts. I decided to operate solo in Worcester, Mass, and I had a ton of fun using that NFED, and you can see it strung up over my shoulder there. And I did nothing more really than throw it up over a branch in the park in Worcester and get on the air. I had so much fun. So another thing that we launched is the ARL Learning Center. If you are familiar at all with colleges and universities and how they teach these days, a lot of university professors take advantage of the university's online course engine. The professor will serve some portion of a class, whether it's all of it or a hybrid, where some of it's in person and some of it's online, using a online learning system. Well, ARL purchased a learning system, and we've populated it with courses and webinars and content to help members become more active in amateur radio. The web address is learn.arl.org. And if you haven't dived into the Learning Center yet, you ought to, because there's just so much there. Now, if you're like me, I spend a lot of time on YouTube also. I enjoy watching a lot of the amateur radio content on YouTube, and there's a lot of good content, but there's also a lot of bad content out there. And one of the things that we've done here with the Learning Center is curate some of the very best content in amateur radio. And so we're attracting people who are subject matter experts on a variety of topics. We've divided some of the topics up between on the air, emergency communications, electronics and technology, and education and instruction. So dive into Learning Center, check it out. And if you're a subject matter expert who'd like to work with us to provide more content in our online platform, let us know. And just like anything, the moment we add some content in there, it starts to age. So we have to start, we're already starting to replace content that we introduced over a year ago in there with new versions, right? Things are constantly changing in amateur radio. So that's one of the benefits of using this as a place to learn, is because you can be assured that we're curating current content and some of the best content in amateur radio. Members have access to everything in there. Non-members might find that they get some access to things that we believe every radio amateur ought to have access to. But at the end of the day, we really want people to be members to access this content. So you'll find a lot of it is available just to members. In October this past year, we introduced the 100th edition of the ARL Handbook. I think the handbook was introduced in 1926. It's not 100 years, but it's 100 editions. There were some years where ARL actually introduced more than one edition of the handbook, and other years where they skipped a year. But at the end of the day, we reached 100 editions. And so we worked with the editing community that helps put together the handbook, led by Ward Silver. And they put together a significantly revised edition of the book. I remember that in college, my first introduction to the ARL handbook was when I went to the EE department at Worcester Polytech and found it was on the shelf of my advisor in the department there. And I said, "Oh my gosh, you're a ham." He said, "Yep, I am." And you know, the ARL handbook is a super book that we even use in the engineering department here at the college, because there's a lot of great resource information on radio engineering that doesn't make a lot of the bachelor level course books that they had. And they said the other thing about the handbook is it's practical. So 100th edition, if you don't already have a copy, check out your dealer or check out ARL's website for it. handbook.arl.org. June 24 and 25, I heard it talked about here in the club meeting, is Field Day. Field Day's coming, it's coming quick. Last Saturday, we introduced the ARL Field Day t-shirt. It's available for sale now. I think we also introduced a hat, a patch, a sticker, and a pin. So lots of fun stuff. And don't forget that if you're organizing a GOTA station, to get some of the newcomers in your club on the air at your at the GOTA station, get some GOTA pins also, and reward your GOTA operators with a little memento of their first time operating Field Day. That's get on the air, right? GOTA, get on the air. But ARL Field Day is June 24 to 25. We've populated the Field Day landing page on the ARL website with a lot of content. That's arl.org/field day or field-day. Either way will get you there. The reaction to this year's logo is overwhelmingly positive. We're really excited about that. There's a little nod to Tune in the World with amateur radio. That book I was telling you about that ARL had many years ago that introduced a lot of people to ham radio. But I think the message, Tune in the World, is still a very valid one in amateur radio today. So we're having fun with it. The logos are available for clubs to download. Start working on the ways that you're going to promote your Field Day site to your community. It's a great way to connect the community with the radio club in a way that's very social and fun, but also demonstrates the capabilities of the amateur radio community on an afternoon in June. Right? You're gonna take the public through setting up a working amateur radio station in a park or a public place in just a couple of hours with a group of people who are trained to be able to do this, and demonstrate the capabilities of how amateur radio can work when all else fails. And the multiplying effect of ARL Field Day is that you join with really hundreds and hundreds of clubs all over the United States that are doing the same thing that you're doing that day. And so we enjoy a lot of press during ARL Field Day. We enjoy a lot of public attention. Radio clubs use them as an opportunity to fill their next amateur radio class. And it's a super way to engage local government with coming out, have a hot dog, and check out what the amateur radio community is capable of. Don't forget to make satellite contacts from your Field Day site. Certainly demonstrate Morse code, but demonstrate the digital modes. Demonstrate what message handling looks like. Demonstrate all the different ways that amateur radio operators can quickly get up and on the air, and dress everybody up. Dress them up in ARL Field Day shirts or club shirts, and have a lot of fun with it. I heard during the meeting tonight something about a generous donation that's going to be provided to your club as a result of an estate. ARL has just introduced an estate planning workbook. It's going to make its debut really in Dayton. It's a free download. It's a PDF. It's our gift to the wider amateur radio community. It's not just there for members. It's there for everybody. The thing that we wrestle with all the time is when that spouse calls us up and they say that the radio amateur in their life passed away, and what do I do with all this equipment now? And we don't think that that's something that a spouse should have to, or a family member, or a parents, or friends should have to wrestle with. That should be something that we as responsible radio amateurs plan for. And so my recommendation to all of you is to download the estate planning workbook. It's a great opportunity to audit the equipment that you already own. And then what happens to it all when you stop living? It happens to us all at some point. And a lot of radio amateurs have put a significant investment in the stuff that they own. So by creating a plan, which this guide will step you through, we've even included some resources like, how do you sell the stuff? What should you do? What's the relationship of the radio club in my community? There's plenty of times when I've connected a widow with a radio club for that assistance. And there's plenty of instances where there's ambulance chasers out there that want to take advantage of people after they've passed away, and they make off really well with a situation that really leaves me quite unsettled. So download this workbook and take a peek at it. And again, it's our gift to the amateur radio community. A new general class question pool takes effect July 1st. And so ARL has a brand new general class license manual. And this is my first time being on the side of designing a cover with the rest of the team. And I had a really neat experience meeting Rhonda. Rhonda is the woman in the in the foreground there on the cover. Alex is my colleague who does ARL's social media. They're both hams, but I met Rhonda at ARL's open house in October last year. We had an open house at ARL headquarters. I went over to W1AW and Rhonda was sitting in front of the HF station making a ton of contacts. And I said, "Who are you?" And she said, "Oh, I come over to W1AW all the time during the day and work with your volunteers here who help me get on HF." And so I called Rhonda up and I said, "Would you like to be on the cover of the ARL General Class License Manual?" And she was really excited. She came by and we had a lot of fun working on this cover in the ARL Radio Laboratory. And I learned a lot about the Flex radio that Rhonda was working on in the station that day. She knows a lot more about HF operating than probably I do. So anyway, the new book comes out. We want to cast the net really wide to encourage a lot of new people to take the leap from technician to general. And ARL's got some great resources to get folks there. I'm personally involved with a program called the Collegiate Amateur Radio Program. I'm one of the staff advisors to the program. Anybody who says there's not enough young people in amateur radio isn't paying attention to the work that ARL is doing with the collegiate amateur radio community. Every month, I meet with college students, including some student advisors for the program. And we have a network all across the country of active college amateur radio clubs. They're getting grants from ARDC and ARL. The students are getting scholarships from ARL. A lot of these clubs have great relationships with the city or town radio club nearby. But at the end of the day, these are students that have developed a pattern of recruiting new students every year in September and saying goodbye to their seniors at the end of the school year. And somehow they're able to keep that life cycle of the radio club going, recruiting, mentoring new licensees, getting them to become club officers. And then after 4 years, they have to say goodbye to them. A lot of vibrant college radio clubs, and they know what they're doing. You'll see one of the pictures here is a group of students at the University of Arizona, where my daughter just graduated, working on the antennas on the top of the science building. And they actually, uniquely, not a lot of radio clubs get this permission anymore. They got permission to actually assemble the towers and antennas on the roof of their academic building. These are the students from Cal Poly, another great radio club. And I'll tell you, it's one of the places where we see a tremendous amount of diversity in both gender and ability and ethnicity in our college radio clubs. A ton of great things happening there. And I'm pretty enthusiastic about the future of amateur radio when I meet with them every month. And finally, I think I mentioned that we're a little bit worried about what the future of volunteer advocacy for regulatory matters looks like in the future as we want to protect our spectrum. And this year, WRC 2023 meets in Dubai, and ARL, through the support of its members and donors, will support a group of volunteers who will be in Dubai from November 20th to December 15th. Do you know how much money it costs to have somebody, a volunteer in Dubai for that length of time? A lot of money. Yet, with the commercialization of spectrum, amateur radio has to be at the table all the time to protect our interests. And so ARL and the International Amateur Radio Union and other societies around the world will send its best volunteers to make sure that amateur radio is well represented at WRC 23. And there's a very significant agenda on everything from protecting amateur satellite spectrum to protecting some of the gigahertz frequencies, and to just making sure that there's someone at the table always ensuring that the amateur radio spectrum is well represented when the world starts to auction off in its imagining radio spectrum. So finally, I'll just offer that, really there's no other organization that's working harder to promote and protect amateur radio. We're doing it for our members. We're doing it for the betterment of our amateur radio service. I enjoy the work every day. It's always challenging, but some of my best friends are in this community, as Tim and others know here tonight. It's a big part of my life, and working hard each day for each of you is really important. At this point, I'll turn it back to you, Tim, and I don't know if there's any time for questions. I can't hear anything yet.
We're working on the audio issue here.
Oh, very good. I heard that. Cool.
Yeah, I'm on a different computer. We're working on the
Absolutely.
audio issue to see if
Yeah,
we can figure out the
no-
mic. Hang on one second.
No worries at all. And again, thank you all for inviting me this evening. My email address is NQ1R@ARL.org. And I just want to offer that if anybody takes a moment after tonight and drops me a note on my email address, and again, that's NQ1R@ARL.org, and tell me something that you learned tonight that you didn't know about ARL, that you found was interesting, I will return an ARL 2023 Field Day patch to you in the mail. So all you have to do is just drop me a couple of sentences that said something that you learned about ARL that you didn't know already, and I'll send one of those nice patches to you. They're beautiful. They're a fully embroidered 2023 Field Day patch.
Bob, do you hear us now?
I do.
All right, great. Bob, thanks again for spending your evening here with the Mercer County Amateur Radio Club and working overtime, and for everything you're doing to promote amateur radio through the ARL. We have a minute for a few questions. Corey's coming up. Hang on a second here, Bob.
The only hard part about doing these presentations with clubs virtually is I don't get any donuts. No snacks here tonight.
Okay, go ahead, Ron.
Okay, I am KE18W from Hubbard, Ohio, Ron Lexfor. And my question is, I heard on the AR news line this week about that they are trying to take some more bandwidth for commercialization of all our electronic devices. Maybe you heard that too if you listened to it. And I was trying to see what bands are they eyeing up.
So I'm not an expert in that area, and I didn't follow that particular one that you're mentioning that closely. But I can tell you that from behind the scenes standpoint, I just want to give you some sense of what does go on at ARL when there are threats like that. And they're really split between two places. One of them is we have a Washington council, a fellow by the name of Dave Siddall. He's a radio amateur. Dave is a staff person of ARLs for a long time, and Dave is embedded with FCC staffers down in Washington. He knows them all. He knows all the players down there. And so he has a good sense of what's going on all the time, and he provides us with an update and often a recommendation on how we should handle different matters that involve the FCC. The other side of that equation is the ARL laboratory. And there's a lot of talent in the ARL lab that will often work on an independent study of some sort that might accompany ARL's response to a notice of proposed rulemaking or a position on a regulatory matter involving spectrum. And so they'll do that too. And then your board of directors, I guess, is that third leg of that stool. Your board of directors often establishes a legislative agenda annually on what it's going to take on behalf of the organization and invest in, staff resource, council resource, their own volunteer resource. They spend a lot of time in Washington knocking on the doors of senators and Congress people. So there's nothing like that happens in a void. So while I don't have an answer to what's going on with that particular matter, I can tell you, for instance, that in our lab, there's a room of grow lights right now. We've done testing most recently on lamps, and bad lamps sold through companies like Home Depot and Lowe's and online on Amazon that make a lot of noise on amateur radio spectrum. And our laboratory engineers are not afraid to pick up the phone and talk to a manufacturer and say, hey, you need to clean this up or we're going to complain about it. And we're going to file a grievance about it. And we do that quite regularly. And the other thing that we work with quite often is power line companies. We're actually a resource for power line companies. You'd think that sometimes radio amateurs would come to us about RFI problems, but sometimes power line companies come to ARL for assistance managing some of the problems that they cause because we're such known experts in that field. And of course, if we make spectrum less, if we make out of spectrum stuff less noisy for radio amateurs, that's better for our community. And so sometimes that involves working directly with power line companies. Back to you.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, somebody else have a question? Even Zoom, the Zoom folks as well, for Bob. Bob, thanks very much. Did a great job, and a round of applause for Bob.
Thanks very much, everyone, and thanks for the privilege of joining your club tonight. Tim, thanks for inviting me, and please don't be strangers. I'll be at Hamvention in May. If you're coming to Dayton Hamvention, you'll meet me there. Otherwise, drop me a note on email anytime. I'm glad to hear from you.
Okay, thanks again, Bob. Good luck, and we'll see you in May. 73.
7-3. Bye for now, everyone.
Okay, and that is the end of another great Mercer County Amateur Radio Club meeting. And thanks